If this doesn't get under your skin, nothing will. The first bark came just after midnight. Not the sharp warning bark Ranger used for coyotes near the tree line. Not the deep territorial bark he gave when trucks rolled too slowly past the old farmhouse. This one was different, urgent, ragged, almost angry, like the German Shepherd had found something he wanted buried to stay buried. Eli Mercer sat up in bed before he was fully awake. Rain tapped the windows. Wind moved through the dead cottonwoods behind the house with a long, hollow moan. For one disorienting second, he thought he was back in Helmand, waking to rotor wash and shouted coordinates. Then Ranger barked again, closer this time, and Eli remembered where he was. Montana. Old farmhouse. 3 acres of mud, weeds, and memories he'd never asked to inherit. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and listened. Silence. That was worse. Because Ranger never barked twice, and then went silent unless he was tracking. Eli grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and the old revolver from the dresser drawer, then paused with his hand on the grip. He hated that he still kept it loaded. Hated more that his body reached for it before his mind did. Outside, a third bark cracked through the rain. Farther off now. Toward the creek. "Ranger!" Eli called as he shoved into his boots. No answer. Just wind. Then the faint sound of frantic scratching. He moved fast through the kitchen, out the back door, and into the cold. Rain had turned the yard into black mud. The security light above the porch flickered once, painting the grass in weak yellow. 30 yards out, near the slope that dropped toward the creek bed, Ranger stood with his front paws planted wide and his whole body leaning forward, barking at the ground like he wanted to fight it. Eli slowed. The dog wasn't looking into the dark. He was looking down. "Ranger!" Eli said sharply. "Back!" The shepherd did not obey. That alone tightened something inside Eli's chest. Ranger had worked beside him for 2 years after the army. Not formally, not in uniform, but in the broken private way men and dogs sometimes save each other without paperwork. Eli had found him at a veterans rehab facility, a retired military working dog no one wanted because he startled at helicopters and bit one handler who smelled like cordite. Eli took one look at those eyes and understood. Since then, Ranger had ignored every stranger on earth, but not Eli. Tonight he ignored him. The dog barked again, then started digging with both paws. Wet dirt sprayed backward into the rain. Eli crossed the yard, boots sinking, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The slope near the creek had partially collapsed after last week's storm, and a section of earth had slumped down just enough to expose something unnatural beneath it. Metal. Square edge. Dark, mud-slick steel. Eli stopped dead. Half buried in the torn hillside, like the storm itself had unearthed it, was a safe. Ranger whined low in his throat and dug harder. Eli crouched, sweeping the flashlight over it. It wasn't some cheap home lockbox. This thing was heavy, industrial, military gray under the mud, with reinforced corners and a wheel-lock front half hidden by packed earth. The exposed face was scraped and rusted in places, but not old enough to have been down there for decades. Maybe years. Not decades. Rain ran over the metal in thin silver lines. Eli stared. He knew this property better than he wanted to. He'd spent the last 6 months cleaning out his late father's house, burning rotten fence posts, hauling junk, pretending the land meant nothing to him. But he had never seen a safe on the property map. Never heard a story about buried valuables. Never known his father to trust banks, much less secret hiding places. Ranger suddenly stopped digging and froze. Ears up. Body locked. Head angled toward the tree line across the creek. Eli killed the flashlight instantly. The world went black. Rain. Wind. His own breathing. Then, From somewhere beyond the cottonwoods, a branch snapped. Not loud. Not accidental. Someone else was out there. Eli stayed crouched with one hand on Ranger's harness, and listened with the patience war had carved into him. 10 years out of uniform, and his body still knew how to disappear when the dark changed shape. Nothing moved for 3 full seconds. Then Ranger growled. Low. Steady. Certain. Eli slowly brought the flashlight back on, and swept it toward the creek bank. Empty. Brush, slick rocks, black water. No figure. No movement. But he had learned the hard way that not seeing danger did not mean danger wasn't seeing you. He turned back to the safe. The front door was caked in clay, but a section of the steel had been cleared, not by rain, not by erosion. By a hand. Fresh finger streaks marked the mud. Someone had touched it recently. Ranger barked once at the safe itself. Eli's pull sharpened. He wiped more mud away with his sleeve and exposed a recessed handle, a dial, and beneath it a brass plate screwed into the door. No manufacturer name. No serial number. Just a single line carved deep enough to survive weather. Property of U.S. Army/Do Not Transport. Eli felt cold move through his stomach. This was not his father's. Or if it was now, it had belonged somewhere very wrong before it reached this hillside. He swept the light over the edges again, and noticed something else. The steel around the hinges was bent slightly inward, as if someone had once tried to pry it open and failed. Along the lower seam, packed into the dried mud, was a strip of red fabric. Not cloth from a shirt. Ballistic nylon. Military. Ranger shoved his nose against the seam and whined. "What do you smell?" Eli whispered. The dog pawed once, then twice, then backed away suddenly and barked at Eli like he was the one moving too slow. That was when Eli heard it. A sound from inside the safe. So faint, he almost wrote it off as rainwater shifting. A tiny metallic tick. He stared at the steel door. Another tick. Not dripping. Not settling. Rhythmic. Ranger's hackles rose. Eli moved closer despite every instinct telling him not to. He pressed his ear near the cold metal and held his breath. Tick. Pause. Tick. His throat tightened. A clock? No. Too soft. Too irregular. Not mechanical enough. Then the sound changed. Not a tick this time. A scrape. Like paper sliding against steel from the inside. Eli jerked back. Impossible. The safe was buried. Sealed. Too heavy to be casually moved. Nothing should have been moving inside it. Nothing living could still be in there. Ranger barked furiously now, not at the sound but at Eli, as if demanding he stop freezing and do something. That hit harder than it should have. Because freezing was how it started that day overseas too. One wrong half second. One doorway. One hesitation while a friend bled out where Eli couldn't reach him in time. No. Not tonight. He wiped the dial clean. Mud came away under his thumb, exposing more scratches in the metal. Not random scratches. Numbers. Someone had etched them there by hand, and then tried to gouge them out later. 7 to 1, 2 to 4. Eli stared at them. His mouth went dry. Those numbers weren't random. They were a date. July 12, 2004. The day his older brother Noah disappeared in Iraq. Officially, Noah Mercer had died in a convoy attack and his remains were never fully recovered. That was the phrase the army had used. Neat. Bloodless. Impossible to fight. Their mother believed it. Their father drank through it. Eli built his whole life in the shadow of it. And now Noah's death date was scratched into a buried army safe on their father's land. Ranger barked again, then spun toward the creek. This time Eli saw the movement. A silhouette between the trees. Human. Still. Watching. Eli snapped the revolver up and shouted, "Don't move!" Lightning flashed somewhere far off beyond the ridge, giving him one hard white frame of the figure before darkness swallowed it again. Rain jacket. Cap's shoulders turned half away. Then the silhouette vanished into the cottonwoods. Ranger lunged after it. "No!" Eli caught the harness just in time. The dog fought him for a second, barking with a fury Eli had only heard twice before, once during a panic attack, once when a stranger came too close to Noah's old duffel in the attic. Noah. The thought hit him so hard he barely noticed his own hands shaking. He forced Ranger back, knelt in the mud, and put both hands on the safe door wheel. Locked? Of course it was locked. But beneath the mud and rust, under the brass plate, his flashlight found one last detail, a narrow slit no wider than a finger. A document slot. Military courier style. Something white was wedged inside it from the other side. Paper. Not just paper. An envelope. Rain hit Eli's face, cold and needling. Ranger pressed against his shoulder, growling toward the trees, while Eli reached for the exposed edge of the envelope with numb fingers. On the front, in block letters faded by moisture but still legible in the flashlight beam, was a name he had not seen in 16 years. Eli forgot the rain. For one long second, the cold, the mud, the silhouette in the trees, even Ranger's furious growling all fell away behind the words on that envelope. For Eli Mercer only. I survived. His brother's handwriting stared back at him through 16 years of grief, military paperwork, and silence. Not similar. Noah's. The hard slant of the N. The way he drove the tail of the Y too far down, as if he was carving the word instead of writing it. Ranger barked toward the creek again, snapping him out of it. The figure in the cottonwoods was gone. Only wet branches moved now. Black water slid over rocks below the bank. Wind dragged rain through the dead leaves with a sound like whispering. Whoever had stood there had either vanished fast or knew the land well enough to disappear in 3 steps. Eli should have pursued. The trained part of him knew that. Unknown observer. Fresh sign on the safe. Move now, clear later. But his hand was still on the envelope. He pulled the paper free. The envelope came out slowly, resisting at first as if the safe itself didn't want to let go of it. Mud smeared across the front. The paper was cold and damp at the edges, but the center had been protected. Recently. Someone had put this here to be found. Ranger pressed against Eli's shoulder and gave a low, restless whine. I know, Eli whispered. He tore the envelope open carefully. Inside was a folded sheet, yellowed but dry enough to unfold without falling apart. The flashlight trembled slightly in his grip as he opened it. Rain struck the page. He shifted over it automatically, shielding it from the weather. 3 lines. That was all. If Ranger found this, they're already too close. Do not trust anyone from the army. Open the safe before sunrise. No signature. No explanation. Just 3 lines and that handwriting. Eli read them twice, then a third time, as if repetition might turn them into something sane. Ranger barked suddenly and wheeled toward the house. Eli rose halfway from the mud and saw light moving across the back field. Not lightning. A flashlight. Someone was crossing his property from the barn side, cutting through the rain in a slow, deliberate path that headed straight toward him and the creek bank. Too steady for a lost hiker. Too direct for a neighbor. Ranger's growl deepened. Eli folded the note, shoved it inside his jacket, and shut off his flashlight again. The field went black. He dropped low behind the half-buried safe and listened. Footsteps in wet grass. Measured. Heavy. Unhurried. The footsteps stopped 20 yards away. Then a voice called through the dark. Eli? Older male. Rough. Familiar enough to scrape memory. Eli said nothing. The voice came again, closer to the creek this time. Easy. It's Ben Halpern. That name landed. Sheriff Halpern. Retired now, but he'd been county sheriff when Eli was a kid. Friend of his father. That should have been reassuring. Instead, the note inside his jacket made it worse. Do not trust anyone from the army. Not the sheriff. But why was Halpern out here after midnight in the rain, walking straight to a buried military safe on private land? Eli kept low and finally answered. Stop where you are. The light beam lowered immediately. Fair enough, Halpern said. I figured you might be armed. What do you want? A pause. Then, to keep you alive for the next 10 minutes. Ranger barked hard at that. Eli rose just enough to see over the safe. Halpern stood near the top of the slope in an oilskin coat and brimmed hat, rain streaming off the shoulders. He had a flashlight in one hand and his other palm open where Eli could see it. Old, gray-bearded, breathing hard from the walk. No visible weapon. That meant nothing. Halpern looked down toward the safe and his expression tightened. Damn it! Storm exposed it sooner than I thought. Eli's grip on the revolver hardened. You knew this was here. Halpern exhaled through his nose. Yes. Ranger barked again and took one step forward. He remembers me, Halpern said quietly. He doesn't sound like it. He remembers enough. Eli's pulse sharpened. Enough for what? Halpern looked toward the tree line across the creek, then back at Eli. Enough to know I'm not the one you should be pointing the gun at. A shape moved behind him in the rain. Not close. Farther back. Barn side. Halpern saw Eli's eyes flick past him and said, sharply now, We're out of time. Did you open it? The safe's locked. Halpern swore under his breath and came one step closer. Ranger exploded into barking so violently Eli almost lost his own thread of thought. Back! Eli snapped. To his shock, Ranger obeyed, but only after planting himself directly between Halpern and the safe. The old sheriff looked at the dog, and something like grief crossed his face. He used to do that for Noah too, Halpern said. The name cut through Eli like wire. Don't, Eli said. I'm not playing with you, son. Then tell me how you know my brother wrote this. Halpern's shoulders sagged under the rain. Because I helped him bury the safe. The world seemed to contract around those words. Ranger's barking stopped. Not because the tension was gone. Because the dog was listening. Halpern went on before Eli could speak. Your father came to me in 2007, drunk and scared, and made me swear that if this ground ever gave way before Noah came back for it himself, I'd keep strangers off it and make sure you were the one who opened it. Eli felt his throat close. Noah was declared dead in 2004. Yes. You signed the county death affidavit. Halpern looked straight at him. Yes. Rage came hot and immediate. Eli stepped out from behind the safe with the revolver up. Then either you lied then, or you're lying now. Halpern didn't move, but his voice changed. Urgent. I lied then. The rain seemed to get louder. Halpern held Eli's gaze. Your father was told Noah died in country. 3 weeks later Noah turned up here half-starved, shot through the side, and scared of every passing engine on the highway. He said if anyone official learned he'd made it home, men would come for him and finish what they started. Eli's hand shook. You expect me to believe that? No, Halpern said. I expect you to remember your father poured a concrete pad behind the barn in winter and said it was for equipment storage even though he didn't own anything worth protecting. I expect you to remember the screaming match you heard through the kitchen vent 2 nights before Noah vanished for good. And I expect you to remember your father burned every letter that came from overseas after July except one. Memory hit him in fragments. His father outside, with a wheelbarrow full of quick-set concrete in freezing sleet. Noah at the kitchen table one night long after the army said he was dead, thin and furious and real enough that Eli thought he had to be dreaming. A slammed door. His mother crying in the pantry after. Eli had buried those memories, because the official version was cleaner than the truth his childhood eyes had not known how to carry. Ranger suddenly spun and barked at the tree line again. This time Eli saw it too. 3 flashlights winked on across the creek. Far apart. Spreading. Advancing. Halpern's voice dropped. "That's why I came." "Who are they?" Halpern answered immediately. "Men who should never have found this county." Ranger growled. The old sheriff took one slow breath and pointed at the safe without taking his eyes off the lights. "Left side, near the hinge line. There's a drainage gap. Noah hid a tubular key in there under grease cloth. You won't get the wheel loose without it." Eli wanted to ask 100 things. Why Noah came home. Why he disappeared again. Why Halpern lied. Why his father buried army property in a creek bank. But the lights across the water were getting closer. One beam swept the far bank. Another flashed off wet rocks. Another stopped, very briefly, exactly where Eli stood. They knew. Halpern unbuttoned his coat and drew a shotgun from under it, old pump action, dark with rain. "You open it," he said. "I'll buy you the time." Eli stared at the weapon, then at the old man holding it with hands that no longer trembled at all. "You're 73. Halpern gave a grim half-smile. 74. Which means I'm too old to run and too stubborn to start now." Ranger barked with sudden fury. A voice from across the creek shouted, "Federal Recovery Team!" Step away from the site. Federal Recovery Team. Not law enforcement language. Not normal. Eli dropped to the mud beside the safe, shoved his fingers into the hinge-side drainage gap, and felt coal-packed sludge, rust flakes, pebbles, then cloth. He yanked free a grease-wrapped cylinder just as the first round cracked through the cottonwoods and punched into the dirt where his head had been. Halpern fired back. The night exploded. The night exploded all at once. Halpern's shotgun lit the rain in a white-orange burst, and the recoil rocked the old man half a step sideways on the slope. Across the creek, one of the advancing lights vanished. Another dropped low. A third kept moving, careful now, disciplined. Whoever was out there did not scatter like trespassers caught in a field. They adjusted like trained men. Eli didn't look up again. He hit the mud beside the safe, fingers tearing at the grease cloth wrapped around the tubular key while rounds snapped through branches overhead. Wet dirt kicked against his cheek. Ranger planted himself above him on the slope and barked so violently it sounded like the dog was trying to rip the darkness apart. "Open it!" Halpern shouted. The key slid free at last, long, narrow, brass darkened by oil and years. Eli jammed it into the hidden lock on the safe's hinge-side plate and twisted. Nothing. His pulse surged. He wiped mud off the key, reseated it, and turned harder. A heavy internal bolt thudded loose. There. Halpern fired again. The blast rolled over Eli's back. Someone across the creek yelled, then answered with 3 sharp suppressed pops. Not hunting rifles. Not local carry guns. Controlled fire. Professional spacing. Ranger snarled and lunged downhill. "Stay!" Eli barked. To his shock, the shepherd checked himself after 2 violent steps, claws digging trenches in the mud, body trembling with the strain of obedience. The dog spun back and slammed one paw against the safe door wheel as if even now he knew the real fight wasn't in the trees. Eli grabbed the wheel and hauled. It resisted at first, metal grinding against packed clay and rust. Then it shifted with a brutal shriek and began to turn. Mud cracked loose around the edges. Water streamed off the steel face. The safe door popped half an inch. A red dot appeared on the safe beside Eli's hand. Laser. He dropped instinctively just as a round punched into the metal where his throat had been. Sparks jumped in the rain. Halpern fired toward the far bank without waiting for a target, blasting bark from a cottonwood and forcing the shooter off the angle. "Move, damn you!" Eli yanked the safe door open, and the smell hit him first. Not cash. Not old paper. Not mildew. Antiseptic. Gun oil. Damp canvas. And under it, faint but unmistakable, the copper smell of old blood trapped in steel. Inside the safe sat 3 waterproof pouches, a satellite phone wrapped in a plastic freezer bag, a field notebook bound in green cord, and a black military hard case no larger than a lunch box. On top of everything lay a single photograph. Eli snatched it up. The beam from his fallen flashlight, still shining sideways through the mud, cut across the image just enough for him to see the faces. Noah. Older than the last time Eli had seen him. Beard. Hollow cheeks. One eye bruised nearly shut. Standing in front of what looked like a concrete wall underground. Beside him stood 2 men in civilian clothes and 1 woman in army combat uniform with no name tape. The woman's face had been scratched out with a knife, hard enough to tear the print. On the back, written in Noah's hand, "If this reaches you before I do, they found me again." A bullet struck the safe door and rang like a bell. Eli dropped lower. Halpern slid down the bank beside him, rain pouring off the brim of his hat. "Take the notebook and the hard case," he said. "Leave the rest if you have to." "Why those?" "Because Noah said if anyone ever came wearing federal language and no federal markings, the book tells you who, and the case tells you why." Ranger barked sharply toward the upstream bend. Eli looked and saw 2 shapes moving through the cottonwoods now, not trying to hide anymore. Dark rain shells. Night vision mounts on caps. One man kneeling at the bank with a suppressed rifle, another advancing wider to flank. "County Sheriff!" Halpern shouted into the rain. "You are trespassing on private land and armed on my property line." A voice came back instantly. Male. Amplified somehow, flat and cold. "This is a federal recovery operation. Step away from the container, and you will not be harmed." Halpern gave a dry laugh. "That's what people say right before they start harming." He racked the shotgun. Eli shoved the notebook and hard case into his jacket and grabbed the satellite phone too. He left 1 pouch behind, took the other 2, then hesitated as Ranger barked at the bottom shelf of the safe. "What?" Eli snapped. The dog planted both front paws on the lower lip and growled into the darkness inside. Eli swept the sideways flashlight beam lower and saw a false floor. A thin seam. Screw heads hidden under mud. Noah had built an extra compartment inside the safe. No time. He jammed fingers under the lip and pried. The panel lifted half an inch, then stuck. A shot hit the slope above them. Mud rained over Eli's shoulders. Halpern fired both barrels so fast the second blast nearly overlapped the first. A man across the creek cried out and fell back into the brush. But the other one kept advancing, low and fast, using the storm and darkness like cover he trusted. "Leave it!" Halpern barked. Ranger did the opposite. With a snarl, the shepherd bit the edge of the false panel and ripped upward. The thin plate tore loose in his jaws. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay one last object. A dog tag chain. Eli stared. 2 tags. Mud-streaked. Army issue. He grabbed them and wiped them clean with his sleeve. The first read, Mercer Noah T. The second was not Noah's. It read, Mercer Eli J. Eli went cold. His own dog tag had been lost in Afghanistan 13 years earlier after an IED hit their convoy. He remembered the blast, the ringing in his ears, the blood on his sleeves, the medic cutting through his vest, while someone shouted for triage priority. He remembered filing a lost form weeks later, because nobody ever found the chain. Yet here it was, hidden in Noah's buried safe on land their father never let anyone touch. Ranger barked toward the creek again. Too late. The flanking man came out of the darkness at 15 yards, rifle already up. Halpern turned, but not fast enough. The suppressed rounds hit the old sheriff twice in the chest, and once high in the shoulder. The impact spun him back against the safe. His shotgun discharged into the mud. Eli felt the hot spray of it across his leg. Everything narrowed. Ranger launched with a sound Eli had never heard from him before. Not barking, not growling, but something raw and murderous. The shepherd hit the rifleman high and tore him sideways down the slope toward the creek. Both vanished into the dark with thrashing water and a single cut-off scream. "Halpern!" Eli caught the old man as he slid. Halpern's coat was instantly slick with blood under the rain. He tried to speak and failed once, then gripped Eli's sleeve with surprising strength. "Listen," he rasped. "No, save it. We move." Halpern shook his head, rain streaming off his beard. "There's a storm cellar under your barn. Concrete hatch. Your father hid Noah there twice." Eli froze. Twice. Halpern coughed hard and blood darkened his teeth. "Notebook, page 12. Don't call local dispatch. Phone's dirty. County's dirty." "What are they after?" Halpern's fingers tightened until they hurt. "Not the money. Not the files. The witness." Eli stared at him. "What witness?" But Halpern was looking past him now, eyes widening toward the far bank. Eli turned. One remaining operative stood in the creek, water around his knees, rifle shouldered. No rush. No panic. Rain on black fabric. Face hidden behind a dark shell hood and half-mask. In his left hand, held up where Eli could see it, was a laminated credentials wallet. The badge inside flashed under the weapon light. U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Army. The note in Eli's jacket seemed to burn against his chest. "Do not trust anyone from the Army." The man lowered the badge slowly, and spoke in a voice somehow calm enough to be worse than shouting. "Staff Sergeant Mercer," he said. "You have something that belongs to the government." Halpern tried to raise the shotgun and couldn't. The man in the creek shifted his aim from Eli to the dying sheriff, then to Ranger climbing out of the water behind him, muzzle black with blood, eyes fixed. More lights flared deeper in the timber beyond him, at least 2 more teams moving in. They were closing the ring. "Drop the case," the operative said, "or I'd put the next round through your dog." At first Eli thought it was the metal in his pocket rattling from adrenaline. Then the vibration came again, insistent, mechanical, impossible under gunfire and rain. The satellite phone inside his jacket began to ring. The night exploded all at once. Halpern's shotgun lit the rain in a white-orange burst, and the recoil rocked the old man half a step sideways on the slope. Across the creek, one of the advancing lights vanished. Another dropped low. A third kept moving, careful now, disciplined. Whoever was out there did not scatter like trespassers caught in a field. They adjusted like trained men. Eli didn't look up again. He hit the mud beside the safe, fingers tearing at the grease cloth wrapped around the tubular key while rounds snapped through branches overhead. Wet dirt kicked against his cheek. Ranger planted himself above him on the slope and barked so violently it sounded like the dog was trying to rip the darkness apart. "Open it!" Halpern shouted. The key slid free at last, long, narrow, brass darkened by oil and years. Eli jammed it into the hidden lock on the safe's hinge side plate and twisted. Nothing. His pulse surged. He wiped mud off the key, reseated it, and turned harder. A heavy internal bolt thudded loose. There. Halpern fired again. The blast rolled over Eli's back. Someone across the creek yelled, then answered with 3 sharp suppressed pops. Not hunting rifles. Not local carry guns. Controlled fire. Professional spacing. Ranger snarled and lunged downhill. "Stay!" Eli barked. To his shock, the shepherd checked himself after 2 violent steps, claws digging trenches in the mud, body trembling with the strain of obedience. The dog spun back and slammed one paw against the safe door wheel as if even now he knew the real fight wasn't in the trees. Eli grabbed the wheel and hauled. It resisted at first, metal grinding against packed clay and rust. Then it shifted with a brutal shriek and began to turn. Mud cracked loose around the edges. Water streamed off the steel face. The safe door popped half an inch. A red dot appeared on the safe beside Eli's hand. Laser. He dropped instinctively just as a round punched into the metal where his throat had been. Sparks jumped in the rain. Halpern fired toward the far bank without waiting for a target, blasting bark from a cottonwood and forcing the shooter off the angle. "Move, damn you!" Eli yanked the safe door open, and the smell hit him first. Not cash. Not old paper. Not mildew. Antiseptic. Gun oil. Damp canvas. And under it, faint but unmistakable, the copper smell of old blood trapped in steel. Inside the safe sat 3 waterproof pouches, a satellite phone wrapped in plastic, a field notebook bound in green cord, and a black military hard case no larger than a lunch box. On top lay a photograph. Eli snatched it up. Noah. Older than the last time Eli had seen him. Beard. Hollow cheeks. One eye bruised nearly shut. Standing in front of a concrete wall underground. Beside him stood 2 men in civilian clothes and 1 woman in army combat uniform with no name tape. The woman's face had been scratched out with a knife. On the back, in Noah's hand, "If this reaches you before I do, they found me again." A bullet struck the safe door and rang like a bell. Eli dropped lower. Halpern slid down the bank beside him, rain pouring off the brim of his hat. "Take the notebook and the hard case," he said. "Leave the rest if you have to." "Why those?" "Because Noah said if anyone ever came wearing federal language and no federal markings, the book tells you who, and the case tells you why." Ranger barked sharply toward the upstream bend. Eli looked and saw 2 shapes moving through the cottonwoods now, not trying to hide anymore. Dark rain shells. Night vision mounts on caps. One kneeling at the bank with a suppressed rifle, another advancing wider to flank. "County Sheriff!" Halpern shouted into the rain. "You are trespassing on private land and armed on my property line." A voice came back instantly. Male. Amplified somehow, flat and cold. "This is a federal recovery operation. Step away from the container, and you will not be harmed." Halpern gave a dry laugh. "That's what people say right before they start harming." He racked the shotgun. Eli shoved the notebook and hard case into his jacket and grabbed the satellite phone too. He left 1 pouch behind, took the other 2, then hesitated as Ranger barked at the bottom shelf of the safe. "What?" Eli snapped. The dog planted both front paws on the lower lip and growled into the darkness inside. Eli swept the sideways flashlight beam lower and saw a false floor. A thin seam. Screw heads hidden under mud. Noah had built an extra compartment inside the safe. No time. He jammed fingers under the lip and pried. The panel lifted half an inch, then stuck. A shot hit the slope above them. Mud rained over Eli's shoulders. Halpern fired both barrels so fast the second blast nearly overlapped the first. A man across the creek cried out and fell back into the brush. But the other one kept advancing, low and fast, using the storm and darkness like cover he trusted. "Leave it!" Halpern barked. Ranger did the opposite. With a snarl, the shepherd bit the edge of the false panel and ripped upward. The thin plate tore loose in his jaws. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay one last object. A dog tag chain. Eli stared. 2 tags. Mud-streaked. Army issue. He grabbed them and wiped them clean with his sleeve. The first read, Mercer Noah T. The second was not Noah's. It read, Mercer Eli J. Eli went cold. His own dog tag had been lost in Afghanistan 13 years earlier after an IED hit their convoy. He remembered filing a loss form because nobody ever found the chain. Yet here it was, hidden in Noah's buried safe on land their father never let anyone touch. Ranger barked toward the creek again. Too late. The flanking man came out of the darkness at 15 yards, rifle already up. Halpern turned, but not fast enough. The suppressed rounds hit the old sheriff twice in the chest and once high in the shoulder. The impact spun him back against the safe. His shotgun discharged into the mud. Eli felt the hot spray of it across his leg. Everything narrowed. Ranger launched with a sound Eli had never heard from him before. The shepherd hit the rifleman high and tore him sideways down the slope toward the creek. Both vanished into the dark with thrashing water and a single cut-off scream. Halpern! Eli caught the old man as he slid. Halpern's coat was instantly slick with blood under the rain. He tried to speak and failed once, then gripped Eli's sleeve with surprising strength. Listen, he rasped. No, save it. We move. Halpern shook his head. There's a storm cellar under your barn. Concrete hatch. Your father hid Noah there twice. Eli froze. Twice. Halpern coughed hard and blood darkened his teeth. Notebook, page 12. Don't call local dispatch. Phone's dirty. County's dirty. What are they after? Halpern's fingers tightened. Not the money. Not the files. The witness. Eli stared. What witness? But Halpern was looking past him now, eyes widening toward the far bank. Eli turned. One remaining operative stood in the creek, water around his knees, rifle shouldered. No rush. No panic. Rain on black fabric. Face hidden behind a dark shell hood and half-mask. In his left hand, held up where Eli could see it, was a laminated credentials wallet. The badge inside flashed under the weapon light. U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Army. The note in Eli's jacket seemed to burn against his chest. Do not trust anyone from the Army. The man lowered the badge slowly and spoke in a voice somehow calm enough to be worse than shouting. Staff Sergeant Mercer, he said. You have something that belongs to the government. Halpern tried to raise the shotgun and couldn't. The man in the creek shifted his aim from Eli to the dying sheriff, then to Ranger climbing out of the water behind him, muzzle black with blood, eyes fixed. More lights flared deeper in the timber beyond him, at least 2 more teams moving in. They were closing the ring. Eli felt the case thudding against his ribs, Noah's notebook turning heavy with water and meaning. Halpern was bleeding out beside him. Ranger stood in the water, chest pumping, waiting for the order that would likely get him killed. And the man in the creek was using the kind of calm voice Eli remembered from briefing rooms before doors got kicked and families got ruined. Drop the case, the operative said, or I put the next round through your dog. Eli's finger tightened on the revolver, but he knew the angle was bad. Mallory had cover, distance, and at least 2 more shooters moving in behind him. One wrong twitch and Ranger died first. One smart move and Halpern still might die anyway. At first Eli thought it was the metal in his pocket rattling from adrenaline. Then the vibration came again, insistent, mechanical, impossible under gunfire and rain. The satellite phone inside his jacket began to ring. The satellite phone rang again. In the middle of gunfire, rain, and a man aiming at his dog. The sound was so unnatural it vibrated against Eli's ribs, like something buried in the dark had finally decided to speak. The operative in the creek heard it too. His posture changed. The rifle stayed locked on Ranger, but the calm in his voice hardened into command. "Do not answer that." That alone told Eli everything he needed. He pulled the phone from inside his jacket. Old military satellite model. Mud-smeared. Scratched casing. No caller ID. Just a blinking incoming line, and a cracked screen bright in the rain. Eli's thumb hovered over the accept key. The man in the creek took one step forward. "Staff Sergeant, if you answer that call, you compromise every chance you have of walking away alive." Halpern, half collapsed against the safe, gave a wet laugh that ended in blood. "Then answer it." Ranger's growl deepened. Eli hit accept. For a second, all he heard was static and the drum of rain on metal. Then a man's voice came through the speaker. Low. Hoarse. Familiar enough to punch the air out of Eli's lungs. "Eli?" The revolver in Eli's hand wavered. Noah. Not close. Not similar. Noah's voice, dragged rougher by time and pain, but Noah. The same older brother cadence. "Say something," Noah said. "I don't have much time." Eli's mouth had gone dry. "Where are you?" Across the creek, the operative shouted. "Hang up now!" Ranger barked explosively at him. Noah's voice sharpened. "Don't listen to the man in the water. And don't go to the barn yet." Halpern's eyes flew to Eli. That landed hard. Halpern had told him the storm cellar under the barn was the move. Now Noah, alive, somehow alive, was warning him away from the exact hiding place Halpern had named. The old sheriff saw the hesitation in Eli's face and gripped his sleeve harder. "He doesn't know the whole layout," Halpern rasped. "Tell him page 12. Noah heard that through the speaker. The silence on the line changed. Then Noah said, "Ends with you." Eli felt the whole scene tilt again. The operative in the creek began moving left, using the conversation to steal angle. Ranger tracked him instantly, teeth bared, body ready. 2 more light beams flickered deeper in the cottonwoods behind him. The ring was tightening. Eli spoke fast. "Halpern says you buried this safe. He says Dad hid you under the barn twice. He says county's dirty. He says he's telling the truth." Noah cut in. Halpern closed his eyes once in grim relief. Then Noah added, "But if you go to the barn tonight, they'll kill all 3 of you." A gunshot cracked from upstream. The round hit the safe door and sparked into the rain. Eli dropped lower. Ranger lunged, then checked on command, trembling with fury. The operative in the creek ducked behind a cottonwood and fired back toward his own team without looking at them. For one split second, Eli thought he'd misread it. Then the man shouted into the dark, "Hold fire! The package is live!" The other shooters stopped. Not because they obeyed him. Because they were listening to someone else. Noah's voice came back through the phone tighter now. "The one talking to you isn't Recovery." Eli stared at the dark shape behind the tree. "Then who is he?" A pause. Then, "He's the reason I disappeared the second time." Rain hissed across the creek. Halpern coughed blood into the mud. The operative stepped out just enough to show one hand again, palm open, badge still visible. "Mr. Mercer, your brother is under coercion. He's been handled for years. Put the phone on the ground and I can still get you out." Noah gave a short laugh through the static. "See? He still talks like that." Eli's pulse sharpened. "Name?" The man in the creek smiled faintly. "Special Agent Warren Kessler. U.S. Army CID." Noah answered before Eli could. "He's lying about the badge. Not about the name." Eli kept the revolver up. "What are you to him?" Noah didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had changed. I was transport. Eli froze. Noah kept going. 2004 wasn't just a convoy attack. They pulled 3 of us out before official recovery hit. Said the route was compromised, and we'd been exposed to classified material. We disappeared into a system nobody was supposed to survive long enough to describe. Halpern muttered, God help us. Kessler didn't deny any of it. He just kept shifting his aim, patient, letting Noah talk, because maybe it didn't matter anymore. Noah's voice dropped. I got out once. Dad helped. Ben helped. They buried the safe because I couldn't carry all of it. Names, dates, route logs, black transfers. Prisoners moved under casualty paperwork. Soldiers declared dead and used off book. The field notebook against Eli's chest suddenly felt like a brick. Then why disappear again? Eli asked. This time Noah answered with silence first. Then, because I wasn't alone. A branch snapped somewhere to Eli's right. Ranger spun and barked toward the lower creek bend. Another team. Closer now. Not just across the water. Moving to cut off the slope below them. Kessler heard it too and raised his voice. You are out of ground, Mercer. Make the smart choice, and I protect the animal. Noah's voice came hard through the speaker. Shoot him. Eli flinched. He's not here for the notebook. He's not here for the case. He's here for the witness. Halpern whispered. Tell him. Noah did. The witness is alive, Eli. For one stunned second the rain itself seemed to stop. Not files. Not records. Not some abstract target. A living person. Eli looked at the safe, at the hard case under his jacket, at Halpern bleeding out, at Ranger standing in Black Creek water ready to die on command. Every piece of the night reassembled around that one word. Alive. Who? Eli asked. Kessler shouted at the same instant. Do not answer that. Noah's voice came through louder, desperate now. Page 12. Read page 12 and run. A sharp chirp cut the line. Then the satellite phone screen went black. Dead. No signal, no battery icon. Just black, as if someone on the other end had reached through the storm and killed it remotely. Eli swore and shoved the phone away. Kessler moved the instant the call died. Not retreating. Advancing. Ranger launched at the same moment. The dog hit the creek in 2 bounds and drove straight for the tree line where Kessler had been. The man fired once. The muzzle flashed white in the rain, but Ranger changed direction mid-lunge, and the round tore through water instead of fur. Eli came up from behind the safe and put 2 rounds toward the flash. One struck the cottonwood. The other drew a grunt. Halpern grabbed Eli's wrist with bloody fingers. Notebook, he gasped. Page 12. Now. This is not the time. It is exactly the time. Gunfire cracked from the lower bend. Bullets chewed through the mud bank beneath the safe. The slope was no longer defensible. They were being bracketed from both sides. Kessler wasn't trying to win the firefight fast. He was fixing Eli in place while the flank closed. Eli ripped the green cord notebook from his jacket and thumbed through soaked pages onto the flashlight glow from the mud. Names. Dates. Grid coordinates. Aircraft tail numbers scratched out and replaced by route chains. It looked less like a diary and more like a ledger kept by a man expecting to die. Page 12. A folded insert slid loose into the mud. Eli snatched it up. A child's drawing. Crayon on lined paper. A house. A red barn. A stick-figure dog much too large for the page. 3 people holding hands under a blue sky. 1 tall figure labeled Noah. 1 smaller figure labeled Eli. And between them, a third stick figure with long dark hair and a smiling face. At the top, written in uncertain block letters, "Mama says Uncle Eli is still coming." Eli stared as if the page itself had become a weapon. On the back, in Noah's handwriting, "The witness is my daughter. She's under the barn." The world dropped out from under him. His brother hadn't disappeared alone. He had a child. A little girl somewhere beneath Eli's own property while armed men closed in. And behind the shocked silence in Eli's head came one final memory, buried so deep he had never trusted it. A small laugh in the storm cellar one summer night, high and quick and impossible, while his father swore no children had been on the land for years. Kessler's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "Mercer. Last chance." Eli lifted his head slowly from the drawing. For the first time that night, fear changed shape. It was no longer about Noah. It was about getting to a child before the army did. Then Halpern seized a fistful of Eli's jacket, dragged him close with the last of his strength, and whispered the words that turned the whole night even darker. "Your niece isn't alone down there." The words hit Eli harder than the gunfire had. Your niece isn't alone down there. For one frozen second, the entire storm seemed to narrow around that sentence. Rain struck the safe. Bullets snapped through branches. Ranger barked from the creek bank like he was trying to hold the dark back by himself. But all Eli could actually hear was the shape of a hidden room beneath his barn and the possibility of children trapped under his own land, while armed men closed in from both sides. Halpern's bloody hand tightened on his jacket. "Listen to me," he rasped. "Storm cellar hatch is under the old feed trough on the barn's south side. Iron ring. Concrete slab. Your father poured dirt over it and laid rotten boards on top so nobody'd hear hollow ground." Eli shoved the crayon drawing and the notebook back inside his jacket. "How many children?" Halpern closed his eyes once, and that answer hurt before he gave it. "I only ever saw 2. Only. As if that made anything smaller. Kessler's voice cut across the creek through the rain. "Mercer! Stand up and throw the case into the water." Eli ignored him and grabbed Halpern under the arm. The old sheriff made a broken sound but fought to his feet anyway, boots sliding in the mud. He was losing too much blood. Eli knew it. Halpern knew it. Ranger probably knew it too, because the dog came out of the creek snarling and planted himself against the old man's side for 1 second, like he was checking if this human could still move. Then 3 shots cracked from the lower bend. Mud burst against the safe. One round ricocheted off the open door with a metallic scream. Kessler's team wasn't waiting anymore. They were collapsing the angles. "Move!" Eli shouted. He hauled Halpern uphill toward the yard, half dragging, half carrying. Ranger bounded ahead 3 steps, spun, barked toward the flanking shooters, then rushed back to pace the retreat. The German Shepherd had become a warning system, rear guard, and compass all at once. Every time he barked, Eli changed angle. Every time Ranger flattened his ears, Eli knew another shooter had found a line. They made the porch just as a round punched through the kitchen window and burst glass over the sink. So much for the house. Eli shoved Halpern against the wall under the eaves and risked one glance toward the back field. 3 beams were moving now. One near the creek. One coming through the cottonwoods. One farther left, circling toward the barn exactly where Noah had warned not to go. Too soon, too openly, too predictably. Kessler knew the barn mattered. Maybe he always had. Halpern caught Eli staring. "They expected you to choose the obvious cover. Noah counted on that. That's why he used the cellar, not the house." He coughed wetly. "But he also knew you'd be forced there eventually." Eli's mind was moving fast now, snapping pieces together whether he wanted them or not. Noah survived Iraq. Came home hunted. Hit a child. Maybe more than one. Buried evidence. Vanished again. And somewhere in the middle of all that, their father, cold, bitter, impossible old man, had helped him build a hiding place beneath the same barn Eli had almost torn down 2 months earlier. Ranger suddenly barked toward the porch steps and leaped sideways. A bullet shattered the porch post exactly where Eli's head had been. The shot came from the field, not the creek. They had a 4-shooter. Eli dragged Halpern through the back door, kicked it shut, and dropped behind the kitchen island. Ranger slid across the floor in a shower of rainwater and mud, then planted himself below the broken window, staring at the darkness outside. Halpern was fading fast. His skin had gone gray around the mouth. Blood soaked through his coat and pooled beneath him on the kitchen tile. "You're not dying in my house," Eli said. Halpern actually smiled at that. "Boy, I've been dying toward this kitchen for 30 years. Then he reached inside his coat and pulled out a ring of old brass keys tied with black electrical tape. "Feed room," he whispered. "South wall. Top key if the hatch lock still catches." Eli took them. Outside, something heavy slammed into the porch. Not a body. Boots. Fast. Ranger erupted in barking. Eli fired through the window frame twice. A man grunted and fell back off the porch, but another beam immediately hit the glass from farther out, blinding white for 1 second before a suppressor coughed and the remaining upper pane blew inward. No more time. Eli threw Halpern's arm over his shoulders and hauled him through the mudroom toward the back hallway that led to the barn door. Ranger stayed at their flank, stopping only once to bare his teeth at the shattered kitchen window where shadows crossed and recrossed in the rain. The barn smelled like wet hay, diesel, and old rot. Lighting flashed beyond the warped boards, turning the rafters white for half a heartbeat. Eli had played in this barn as a boy, fallen from its loft, hidden in its stalls, sworn he'd never come back after his father died. Now every inch of it felt wrong, as if the building had been waiting years for this exact night. "South side," Halpern whispered. Eli dragged him past the rusted tractor and overturned tack shelves. Ranger ran ahead, nose low, then stopped near the old feed trough against the south wall and barked so hard the sound bounced off the rafters. There. The trough was rotten, half collapsed, filled with moldy hay and broken boards. Eli shoved it aside, coughing as dust rose. Beneath it lay a patch of packed dirt darker than the surrounding floor. He dropped to one knee and clawed it back with both hands until his fingers struck concrete. An iron ring emerged from the mud. A hatch. Real. Locked. Bootsteps thudded outside the barn wall. Closer now. One beam slid through the cracks between the boards, moving slowly, searching. Kessler wasn't rushing. He was hurting. Eli jammed the first brass key into the hatch lock. Wrong. Second key. Nothing. Third key. The tumblers caught. Ranger barked toward the main barn doors. Someone outside shouted, "Thermal confirms movement inside." Another voice answered, "Package is below grade. Do not breach with fire." Package? They weren't talking about the notebook or the case. They were talking about the children. Eli twisted the key, and the lock gave with a dull internal clunk. He hauled on the ring. The hatch resisted under years of dirt seal, then lifted suddenly in a sucking burst of cold air and old concrete smell. Dark steps vanished downward. And beneath the smell of damp earth came something else. Soup. Soap. Human breath. Occupied air. Halpern made a broken sound that might have been relief. "Go! I'm taking you!" "No!" The old man grabbed Eli's sleeve again with bloody fingers and forced eye contact. "If I go down, you lose the door. If you lose the door, they come right after you. I stay up." Eli shook his head. "Not a chance." Halpern's voice hardened with the last of his old sheriff command. "Listen. You have never had much talent for leaving people behind. I know that. Your brother knew that. But tonight, if you don't leave me here, children die. Live with the right guilt for once." The sentence hit like a blow. Before Eli could answer, the main barn door shuddered under a heavy impact. Once. Then again. Breech ram. Ranger whirled toward the sound and then back to Eli, frantic, torn between attack and duty. The dog's breathing had gone fast and shallow, eyes bright with absolute readiness. Halpern pulled the shotgun toward himself, though Eli had no idea if he even had the strength to fire it again. "You get down there. You bar it from below. You do not come back up until dawn or sirens, whichever gets here first." Halpern, the old man looked at him, and for the first time that night Eli saw not the sheriff, not his father's friend, not the man who had signed a lie into county paper, but simply someone who had spent too long carrying one secret because no one else survived to help him. "Tell Noah," Halpern whispered. "I kept my word as long as I could." The barn doors cracked inward. Ranger snarled. Eli made the choice. He grabbed the hard case, the notebook, the phone, shoved the dog tags deep into his pocket, then dropped through the hatch and turned to reach up for Halpern. But the old man slammed the hatch down from above. Concrete met concrete with a final grinding boom. The lock snapped. Darkness swallowed Eli whole. Above him, muffled through stone and dirt, came one last sound from the barn. Halpern cycling the shotgun. Then the first burst of automatic fire. Darkness swallowed Eli so completely he lost all sense of distance for a second. He hit the concrete steps hard, one shoulder slamming into a wall slick with damp and old dust, then slid the rest of the way down into cold air that smelled of canned food, kerosene, bleach, and people forced to live too quietly. Above him, through 3 feet of dirt and a locked hatch, the barn thundered with muffled gunfire. The sound came down like weather through stone. Then something heavy crashed onto the steps behind him. Eli spun with the revolver up. Ranger landed in the dark with a grunt, claws scraping concrete, then bounded the rest of the way down and planted himself between Eli and the lower room, ears up, body rigid, growling into the black. For one wild heartbeat Eli thought the dog was reacting to an intruder already below. Then a child's voice trembled out of the darkness. "Don't shoot!" Not Noah. Not an adult. A little girl. Eli clicked on the flashlight. The beam found a bunker room no one had any right to have built under a barn. Concrete walls. 2 cots. Shelves of canned goods and water bricks. A battery lantern burning low on a table. Medical supplies lined up with careful military neatness. Hand-drawn maps taped to one wall. A propane heater. A radio set with its speaker unplugged. And near the back, half behind a steel shelving unit, 2 children crouched together with fear written all over them. The girl looked about 9. Dark braid. Oversized flannel shirt. Thin face, wide eyes, mud on one knee as if she'd fallen and gotten back up too fast. One arm was wrapped protectively around a smaller boy of maybe 6, who held a kitchen knife in both shaking hands like he meant it. Ranger's growl changed the second the light touched them. Not threat. Recognition. The shepherd whined once and took 2 careful steps forward. The girl's face cracked open with relief, so sudden it looked painful. "Ranger!" She said the dog's name like she had been waiting for him. Ranger went straight to her. Not cautiously. Not checking scent first. Straight there, tail low, head pressed into her chest, while the girl dropped the little boy's shoulder and grabbed fistfuls of the dog's fur with both hands. That nearly undid Eli. Because Noah's daughter, or whoever this child was, already trusted the one creature Eli trusted most. Which meant this place, as insane as it was, wasn't a trap built tonight. Ranger had been here before. The little boy stared at Eli over the girl's shoulder and whispered, "Is Ben dead?" Eli's throat tightened. "I don't know." The girl looked up sharply. "He told us if the hatch opened and it wasn't Noah, we run to the back wall." She swallowed. "But Ranger came, so I knew it had to be you." Eli lowered the revolver by an inch. "You know who I am?" She nodded once. Tears were in her eyes, but she was fighting them with the kind of discipline no child should need. "Uncle Eli." The word hit harder than the note in the safe had. The boy beside her looked confused. "He's real?" Ranger barked softly at the question, almost offended by it. Eli forced air into his lungs and crouched slowly, so he didn't tower over them. "What's your name?" The girl wiped her face with her sleeve. "June." Of course, he thought. Noah always said if he ever had a daughter, he'd name her after summer because winter took too much from people. "And him?" The boy tightened his grip on the kitchen knife. "Mason." June answered for him. "He's been with us 7 months. Not brother. Not cousin. Just with us." Eli caught that immediately. Before he could ask, 3 rapid impacts hammered the hatch above. Concrete dust sifted from the ceiling. Ranger snapped toward the stairs and barked hard. They were at the barn. Already? June flinched, but not from surprise. From confirmation. "They found it." Eli crossed to the stairwell and found the lower lock bar, a steel throw plate welded across the inside frame. He jammed it into place and slid a rusted pin through. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would force them to work for it. When he turned back, June was staring at the hard case bulging beneath his jacket. "Did he get it out?" she asked. "He?" "Noah." Just hearing his brother's name spoken here, in this hidden room under the family barn, made reality feel unstable again. Eli took the notebook and hard case out and set them on the table. "He called me. Said the witness was alive." June and Mason exchanged a look too fast and practiced to belong to children. Then Mason said very quietly, "Which one?" Eli froze. "Which one?" "Not what do you mean?" Not confusion. He looked from the boy to the girl, then to the maps on the wall. There were more than escape routes pinned there. Hide marks in pencil near the cot. Supply tallies. Dosage notes. 3 different handwriting styles layered over each other. This bunker had held more lives than the 2 children in front of him. "How many people have been down here?" Eli asked. June's face closed a little. "Depends what week." Rainwater dripped somewhere behind the wall in slow hollow taps. Above them, another burst of automatic fire rumbled through the barn floor, then silence, then one heavy thud that sounded like a body hitting wood. Halpern, Eli thought, and pushed the image away before it could stop him. He opened the green cord notebook to page 12 again, this time under steady light. The child's drawing was still there. The words on the back had not changed. "The witness is my daughter. She's under the barn." But below that, partially hidden by dried mud he hadn't noticed in the rain, was one more line. He scraped it clean with his thumbnail. "If June is not alone, trust the second witness first." Mason saw him read it. The little boy's face went blank in a way that no 6-year-old should know how to do. June stepped half in front of him. Eli looked at the hard case. "How do I open this?" June answered immediately. "The tags." He pulled the chain from his pocket. Noah's tag. His own supposedly lost tag. On the side of the hard case, invisible until he turned it toward the lantern, were 2 narrow insertion slots beside a recessed latch plate. He slid the tags in. The latches clicked open at once. No combination. No biometric lock. Just bloodline and history. Inside the case lay 4 things: a weatherproof thumb drive, a folded satellite image of the property with red circles around the creek and barn, a pistol magazine wrapped in tape, and a second photograph. Eli picked up the photograph first. Same underground concrete wall as the first one from the safe. Same two men in civilian clothes. Same woman in army uniform. But in this copy, her face had not been scratched out. He stared. Not because he knew her from the army. Because he knew her from childhood. The woman in the photo had been in his house 3 times when he was a boy. Once at Thanksgiving. Once at Noah's graduation barbecue. Once late at night at the kitchen table, whispering with his father, while Noah pretended to be asleep on the couch and Eli listened from the hallway. She had called herself Aunt Lydia. Only she wasn't family. The name tape on the uniform in the photograph read, L. Kessler. Eli felt the room tilt. Same last name as the man in the creek. Same eyes. June saw his face change. You know her. Eli barely heard himself answer. I knew her as Lydia. Mason spoke again, tiny voice steady in a way that made Eli cold. She's dead. June shot him a look. But the boy kept talking because children who live around secrets eventually lose the instinct to stop at the edge of them. Noah said she died before me. Ben said she didn't die right away. The pieces slammed together too fast. Kessler wasn't just hunting a witness. He was hunting something tied to his own family. And the woman in the scratched photo, the army woman Noah had trusted enough to keep beside him, shared his name. Eli grabbed the satellite image. On the back, Noah had written coordinates and short notes in code Eli half remembered from childhood treasure hunts they used to make impossibly serious for no reason. Except this wasn't play. One mark pointed behind the barn. One to the creek. One to a narrow strip of woods west of the road. Next to the west mark were 2 words. Fallback grave. June saw him reading that too. He said if he ever didn't make it back before sunrise, you were supposed to take us there. Where is Noah now? Eli asked. The children looked at each other again. This time June answered. He said if the phone worked, he'd already be moving. Moving from where? June's lips pressed together. Mason looked down at the floor. Ranger suddenly left her side and crossed the bunker to the back wall near the supply shelf. He barked once, then dug his paws against the concrete at a spot that looked solid to Eli. June stood so fast her chair scraped. No! Eli turned. What? She shook her head. That's not for now. Another impact shook the hatch above. Louder this time. Metal on metal. Tools, not rifle butts. They were cutting or prying the outer hardware. No time. Eli crossed to the back wall where Ranger kept barking and shoved the supply shelf aside. Behind it, painted the same gray as the concrete, was a narrow steel door with no handle on the outside. A hidden passage. June's face had gone white. Noah said we only use that if they get through the hatch. Well, Eli said, listening to the scream of metal above them. I'd say we're there. Mason began shaking. Not from the noise. From the door. Eli crouched in front of him. What's in there? The little boy looked past Eli at the hidden steel panel and whispered the answer like he was afraid the concrete itself might hear him. That's where Noah keeps the woman. The room went silent except for Ranger's breathing and the rain above. Eli stared at him. What woman? Mason swallowed hard. The one who says Kessler is her son. For 1 second, nobody moved. Not Eli. Not June. Not even Ranger. The only sounds in the bunker were the rain above the barn roof, the violent metal shriek coming from the hatch as men worked it from the outside, and Mason's breathing. Too fast, too shallow, the breathing of a child who had already learned what happens when grown-ups open the wrong door. Eli turned slowly toward the hidden steel panel in the back wall. The woman who says Kessler is her son, he repeated. You've been hiding her down here? June shook her head too fast. Noah hid her. We just stayed away unless he told us not to. Ranger barked once at the door and pawed the concrete again. The hatch above boomed under a new impact. Not rifle fire this time. A hydraulic spreader or breech tool. They were no longer trying to intimidate. They were entering. Eli crossed to the steel panel and ran his hand over the surface. Cold. Old. Better fitted than the bunker door behind him. The kind of concealed passage somebody built before they needed it, not in panic after. There was no external handle, just a recessed plate set low on the frame. June spoke from behind him. "There's a release under the shelf bracket." He found it immediately. A spring-loaded latch hidden where a child would never notice it unless someone showed them. "Why didn't Noah want this opened?" Eli asked. June's answer came after too much silence. "Because she lies when she's scared. And she's always scared." Mason shook his head. "She doesn't lie about him." "About who?" Eli snapped. Mason swallowed. "Kessler." The breech tool screamed above them. A bolt sheared. Concrete dust rained from the stairwell. Ranger snarled. No more time. Eli hit the release. The steel panel popped inward with a hiss of old seals breaking. A wave of stale, colder air rolled out, carrying a smell that did not belong to the bunker: medication, damp wool, and the metallic trace of an old room kept too long without sunlight. Ranger slipped through the gap before Eli could stop him, nails scraping on concrete. "Ranger!" The dog ignored him. Eli swept the flashlight into the passage and followed. The corridor beyond was narrow, poured concrete, maybe 20 feet long, with utility pipes running low along one wall. It bit once to the right, then ended in a second room smaller than the bunker, but built with the same deliberate secrecy. A cot. A table. 2 water jugs. A medical cabinet. One bare bulb hanging dead from the ceiling. And on the cot, rising too quickly under the flashlight beam, was a woman wrapped in a gray blanket with one wrist cuffed to an iron ring set into the wall. She flinched like the light itself had hit her. Ranger reached her first. Not barking. Not attacking. The shepherd stood rigid at the foot of the cot, growling low, uncertain, as if scent told him this person mattered while instinct warned him not to trust her. The woman's face was thinner than in the photograph. Older. Bruised under one cheekbone. Gray threaded through dark hair cut badly at the shoulders. But the eyes were the same eyes from the army picture in Noah's safe, the same hard intelligence beneath exhaustion. Lydia Kessler. Or what was left of her. When she saw Eli, something changed in her face. Surprise first, then recognition, then a look so close to grief it made him stop halfway into the room. "You have his eyes," she whispered. Eli kept the revolver up. "You know who I am?" "Yes." Her voice was rough with disuse. "You're the little brother who wasn't supposed to survive long enough to matter." June made a sound behind him, somewhere between anger and fear. Mason stayed hidden in the passage, too smart to come farther in. The hatch above took another hit. Closer now. Louder. Time bleeding out. Eli ignored it for one heartbeat. "Mason says Kessler is your son." A flicker of pain crossed Lydia's face. "Biologically, yes." "Then why are you chained in a room under my barn?" Lydia laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Because blood is not the same thing as loyalty. You should know that by now." June stepped into the doorway with the lantern from the bunker, raising it enough to throw warm light across the room. Lydia saw her and went still. "You kept them alive," Lydia said softly. June's chin lifted in a way that looked exactly like Noah when he was trying not to show fear. "Noah did." Lydia looked at Eli again. "Then where is he?" The question landed hard because nobody in the room had an answer that could survive daylight. Eli didn't give her one. "Start talking." Above them, steel groaned under pressure. Lydia heard it and closed her eyes once, calculating. If Warren's outside, then he found the safe. If he found the safe, then he knows Noah planned for failure. Which means he will assume there are 2 exits, not 1. Eli felt his pulse sharpen. There's another exit? She nodded toward the far wall. Drain conduit under the west pasture. Narrow. Flooded this time of year. But passable. June stared at her. Noah never told us. Noah told children what children needed, Lydia said. He told me what soldiers would need after he was gone. Gone. She said it like she already knew. Eli stepped closer, voice dropping. What did Noah tell you about me? The old army woman studied him for a second too long. That if this ever fell to you, it meant he'd run out of time. That was answer enough. The first metal pin from the bunker hatch clanged down the stairwell. They were through the outer lock. Ranger snapped toward the passage and barked once, violent and immediate. Lydia didn't flinch. Warren won't rush the stairs. He'll flood the bunker first. June went pale. Flood it with what? Gas if he wants you quiet. Fire if he wants you erased. Eli's jaw tightened. And which does he want tonight? Lydia met his eyes. That depends on whether you already opened the hard case. Eli said nothing, which told her everything. Her expression hardened for the first time. Not fear now. Soldier. Then he needs at least one of you alive long enough to recover the drive. June blinked. Drive? Eli pulled the thumb drive from the case and held it up between 2 fingers. Lydia's whole body changed. Not because of the drive itself. Because of what it meant was no longer hidden. Put that away, she said sharply. Now! He didn't. What is it? Her answer came fast. A names archive. Transfers, black detentions, false casualty reports, domestic holding sites, juvenile routing, handler rosters. Enough to collapse careers, governments, families. June whispered. And Noah had it? He stole it. The stairwell above shuddered under a new impact, then another. Ranger barked again and moved to block the passage. Eli pressed harder. Why does Warren want the children? Lydia looked at June and Mason, then back at him. Whatever lie she might have used once was gone now. Because some of them can identify places and people they were never meant to remember. Because some were born inside the system and never recorded anywhere else. Because Warren's operation survives by controlling who gets counted as real. And June? At that, Lydia's gaze shifted. Not to June. To Eli. A bad sign. Asked a better question, she said quietly. He already knew he wouldn't like it. What better question? Why did Noah trust your property more than anywhere else in the country? Silence. Then Mason answered before anyone else could. Because of your dad. Eli turned. The boy stood at the passage mouth clutching the kitchen knife with both hands again, then shoulders shaking but face steady. Noah said Grandpa built part of it. Mason whispered. The old part. Before Noah added the bunker. Eli stared. His father. Again. Every buried thing on this land seemed to lead back to him like roots finding the same grave. Lydia saw the realization hit. Your father didn't just help Noah hide. He helped us once before that. In 1998. He moved a child off a military transport chain and buried the paperwork. The room went cold around that sentence. Eli felt it before he understood it. June did not. But Lydia was no longer looking at her. She was looking at Mason. No, Eli said instantly, though nobody had asked him anything yet. Lydia's voice was almost gentle. That boy is not random fallout, Eli. Warren has been searching for him for years. Mason backed up one step. June moved instantly in front of him. Stop, she snapped. You don't get to say things like that, and then look at him like that. The hatch above burst inward. This time they all heard it clearly. Metal slamming concrete, boots entering the stairwell, Warren Kessler's voice cutting through the bunker above with cold command. Thermal confirms 4 in the primary chamber. Flood the lower room and push them to the west conduit. Lydia went white. He knew about the second exit. Smoke began sliding under the hidden passage door from the bunker side, not black smoke, but thick pale vapor hugging the floor. Gas. Ranger snarled and backed away from it, coughing once. June grabbed Mason's hand. Eli shoved the drive and notebook back inside his jacket. Lydia reached beneath her cot and pulled out a rust-dark pistol he had somehow missed entirely. "You were chained with a gun?" he said. She snapped the cuff chain free with a small hidden key and stood. "I was waiting for a son who still believed blood meant something." The words hit harder than they should have. Then the gas thickened. Children started coughing in the bunker. Kessler's footsteps were on the stairs. Lydia crossed to the far wall, yanked down a canvas tarp, and revealed a narrow circular tunnel mouth barely big enough for one adult at a time. "June first," she said. "Mason second. Ranger with him." Ranger did not move. His eyes were fixed on the gas, then on Eli, then on the stairwell beyond the passage, as if he understood the next 30 seconds would decide who lived. Eli gripped the revolver. "You're coming with us." Lydia gave him a look full of hard old sorrow. "If Warren sees me, he'll stop thinking like an operator and start thinking like a son. That buys you time." Above them, Kessler called out, voice calm as winter. "Mother, if you're still alive in there, answer me now, and I let the children breathe." Nobody in the room moved, because everybody understood the trap. Then Mason began to cough harder, doubled over, and June shouted his name. High danger had arrived. Mason's cough broke the room open. It started as one sharp choke, then another, then a full-body spasm that bent the boy double where he stood clutching June's hand. The pale gas rolling under the passage door had reached them faster than Eli thought possible. Ranger barked once, frantic and violent, then shoved his muzzle under Mason's arm, as if he could physically drag the child toward air. "Move!" Eli shouted. June didn't wait this time. She hauled Mason toward the circular tunnel mouth, while Lydia crossed the room in 3 hard strides and fired once through the hidden passage toward the bunker stairs. The shot cracked like lightning in the concrete. A man above cursed. Kessler's voice cut through the chaos instantly. "Gas the breach room first. I want them alive if possible." If possible. That was the part Eli heard. Possible meant optional. Lydia grabbed Ranger's collar and shoved him toward the tunnel. "With the children!" The shepherd resisted for half a second, eyes locked on Eli. Then June stumbled trying to get Mason into the narrow opening, and Ranger chose for himself. He turned, pressed his body against Mason's back, and forced the coughing boy into the conduit head first. June went after him. Eli moved to follow, but Lydia caught his sleeve. "Listen carefully," she said. There wasn't time to listen carefully. That was exactly what he did. "The conduit forks in 20 yards. Left goes under the west pasture like I told you. Right climbs into the old drainage tower." Her eyes held his with brutal urgency. "Take the left if you want the children alive in the next 5 minutes." Eli stared. "And the right?" Her jaw tightened. "Kessler thinks the drive stayed with you. He'll send pursuit after the left tunnel. The right gives you angle on the surface." Understanding hit. A decoy route. A soldier's choice. One path for protection, one for attack. He hated her for making sense. Another canister clinked into the bunker outside and began hissing. The gas thickened at floor level, white and ghost-like in the lantern glow. Mason was still coughing in the conduit. June's voice echoed faintly from within, trying to calm him while dragging him forward. Eli grabbed Lydia's arm. "You're coming." She gave a tired half-smile. "No, I'm done leading people in rooms." "That's noble." She chambered another round into the rust-dark pistol. "It's also how men get everyone killed." The words landed because they were too close to everything he already feared about himself. Kessler's boots reached the lower bunker. Ranger exploded into barking from inside the conduit. Lydia looked past Eli toward the passage door, and something in her face changed. Not fear, not exactly, but the hard acceptance of someone finally meeting the shape of the thing she always knew would come for her. "He won't rush in blind," she said. "He'll talk first. He always talks first." As if summoned by the memory, Kessler's voice drifted through the gas and concrete, eerily calm. "Mother." No answer. "I know you can hear me." Lydia's eyes closed once. Not weakness. Centering. Then she opened them, and shoved the pistol grip first into Eli's hand. "2 magazines. Old recoil spring. Don't trust the last round." He stared at the weapon. "You'll need something better than that revolver," she said. "And if he sees my sidearm in your hand, he'll know I chose you over him." The sentence cut deeper than either of them expected. Eli took the pistol. Lydia stepped back toward the passage, shoulders squared, breathing shallow now from the gas. "Go!" "No, Eli." The way she said his name stopped him. Not because of authority. Because it sounded like someone addressing a child she had known before war and lies and graves. Something older than the bunker moved in that voice, and suddenly Eli remembered her at the Thanksgiving table when he was 10, the woman he thought was just one of Noah's army friends. She had watched the doors and windows even while smiling. She had brought June-colored candies in her pocket for no reason, except maybe she already knew children trapped in adult storms needed sweetness, where they could find it. He looked at her fully then. "What did my father do for you?" Lydia held his gaze as Kessler's men shifted outside the passage. "He opened his land when no one else would. He said children should disappear into dirt, and weather before they disappear into paperwork." Eli felt the answer settle somewhere painful and permanent. His father had not just buried secrets here. He had buried rescues. Bootsteps moved through the bunker outside. Kessler spoke again. Closer now. "You taught me patience, Mother. Don't make me teach these children pain." June cried out from inside the conduit. "Uncle Eli." That ended it. Eli backed into the tunnel mouth, then stopped one last time. "If you see an angle, take it." Lydia gave him the ghost of a nod. "If I see my son, I'll take that too." Then Eli dropped into the conduit, and dragged the canvas cover back across the opening behind him. Darkness swallowed the room. The tunnel was barely wider than his shoulders. Wet concrete scraped his back. Mud and runoff soaked through his knees as he crawled fast, one hand on the pistol, the other reaching for June's boot soles in the dark. Ahead, Ranger kept giving low directional barks, so the children wouldn't lose the path. Behind them, muffled through concrete, came Kessler's final offer. "Last chance." Lydia answered with a gunshot. Then the bunker erupted. Muffled bursts. Men shouting. A deeper boom that shook dirt down the conduit walls. Mason whimpered ahead. June didn't stop moving. The fork appeared as Lydia promised. A narrow Y cut into old poured concrete. Left tunnel low and wet. Right tunnel angled upward with rusting ladder rungs set into the wall. Eli's pulse hammered. His whole body wanted to go right, get above ground, circle back, end Kessler before more of this could happen. Then Mason coughed again, harsher now. "Children first. Always." "Left," Eli ordered. June dragged Mason into the lower tunnel. Ranger followed close against them. Eli took the rear, pausing only long enough to pull the canvas-wrapped notebook from his jacket and rip out 2 pages from the back. He shoved them into the right branch and let the trickle of runoff carry them upward. A scent trail. Paper noise. A false lead. Maybe enough to make pursuit hesitate. The left tunnel dropped steeply and filled ankle-deep with freezing water. The children slipped constantly. June nearly fell twice but kept getting up. Eli took the smallest one. Mason wasn't the youngest. There was little Elsie, shivering and silent, and carried her against his chest while still forcing himself forward. Ranger kept circling between the front and rear of the line, checking every child like he was counting them by smell. Then something hit the conduit behind them. A metallic clatter. Not collapse. A flash grenade rolling through standing water. "Down!" Eli shouted. The blast inside that narrow tube was blinding and brutal. White light and sound smashed through the darkness. The children screamed. Ranger yelped. Eli hit the floor over Elsie, ears ringing so hard he felt sick. His vision came back in pieces. June crawling, Mason frozen, pale light behind them growing larger. Pursuit? Kessler hadn't bought the decoy for long. "Move!" Eli roared, shoving Mason forward. This time the boy obeyed. The tunnel widened suddenly into a drainage chamber lined with old brick. A rusted ladder climbed to a steel grate above. Rainwater dripped through it in silver threads. Surface. June saw it and almost collapsed in relief. Then Ranger began snarling at the chamber floor. Eli swept the flashlight down. Tripwire. Then his fishing line, stretched across the base of the ladder at ankle height, tied into a block fixed under the lowest rung. Kessler knew the route. Of course he did. June whispered. "What is it?" "Don't move." He passed Elsie to her, crouched low, and traced the wire with the flashlight. The charge wasn't large. Anti-personnel directional, homemade but precise. It would turn the ladder throat into a meat grinder. Built to kill people climbing out in a hurry. Behind them came splashing footfalls. Closer now. One man at least. Maybe two. Eli's mind ran fast. No time to disarm properly. No room to retreat. He unclipped the pistol magazine, found the taped spare Noah had left in the hard case, stripped a single round free, and wedged the casing under the tripwire trigger arm just enough to hold tension. June stared. "Will that work?" "It has to." Ranger barked toward the tunnel entrance. A light flashed there. Eli sliced the wire with Noah's field knife. Nothing. One heartbeat. Then the trigger arm snapped forward against the round casing, jammed, and held. Still nothing. A man rushed the chamber entrance. Kessler himself. Rain shell half open, face mask gone, eyes bright and terrible under wet gray hair. He saw the children at the ladder, saw Eli kneeling by the wire, saw exactly what had happened, and smiled. "Good," he said. "I was hoping you'd be quick enough to matter." Eli fired. Kessler dropped sideways behind the brick arch as the round shattered mortar where his head had been. Return fire slammed into the chamber immediately. Brick fragments burst over the children. Ranger lunged for the entrance, but Eli caught him just in time. The old grate above them rattled. Then, from the surface, hands seized it. For one wild second Eli thought more of Kessler's men had circled them. Then a voice shouted down through the rain. "June!" "Ranger!" "Noah." June broke. Not with panic. With hope so sudden it sounded like pain. "Dad!" The grate tore open from above, pale dawn and rain spilling into the chamber. And Kessler stepped back into the entrance below, raised a remote trigger in one hand, and said the words that twisted rescue into something far worse. "If Noah pulls you out," he said, "the barn goes with Lydia inside it." For one suspended second, nobody moved. Rain poured through the open grate. Dawn bled pale gray over the rim of the drainage shaft. June was halfway up the ladder, staring into the face of the father she had not seen in too long. Eli had one hand on Ranger's harness, and the other on Lydia's old pistol. Kessler stood in the tunnel entrance below, soaked and breathing hard, the remote trigger held up like a priest offering judgment. "If Noah pulls you out," he repeated, calm as winter, "the barn goes with Lydia inside it." June's face went white. "No," she whispered. Above them, Noah Mercer knelt in the rain with one hand locked on the grate and the other stretched down toward his daughter. He looked nothing like the brother Eli had last seen as a ghost in his own memory. He was thinner, harder, a scar cut down from one temple into the beard line. But the eyes were Noah's, still sharp, still carrying too much. And now they were fixed on Kessler with pure hatred. "You always loved speeches," Noah said. Kessler's smile barely moved. "And you always loved impossible rescues." Eli's mind ran hard and fast. If Kessler was bluffing, calling it wrong killed Lydia. If he wasn't bluffing, shooting him could trigger the charge anyway. If they froze, the tunnel became a coffin. Ranger solved the first part. The shepherd stopped straining toward Kessler, and instead turned his head sharply toward the remote. Not the man, the device. Then Ranger growled low and certain. Eli looked closer. Kessler's thumb was not actually on the trigger plate. It was hovering. A bluff? No. Not exactly. A dead man's safety maybe. Or a timed arm. Something that required deliberate pressure. Noah saw Eli see it. That was enough. He shouted one word. "Duck!" Eli dropped flat and dragged the children with him. Noah fired from the surface at the exact same instant. The shot came down through rain and grating and punched Kessler high in the shoulder. The remote spun from his hand and skidded across the wet brick floor. Ranger launched. The dog hit the device first, batting it sideways under the ladder where Kessler couldn't reach it. Kessler fired blindly one-handed from the tunnel entrance. The round shattered brick over Eli's head. Eli answered with 2 shots of his own. One missed. The second took Kessler in the thigh and dropped him to one knee. "Up!" Eli shouted. The children moved all at once. June climbed first because Noah physically hauled her through the grate. Mason followed, sobbing now, then Elsie, then the others in a blur of mud, scraped hands, and panic. Eli shoved each child upward while Ranger held the bottom angle like a living barricade, teeth bared at Kessler. Kessler tried one last desperate move. He lunged not for the gun, not for Eli, for the remote. Ranger met him halfway. The impact slammed Kessler into the chamber wall. The old operative screamed as the shepherd clamped down on his forearm and drove him sideways into the runoff. The remote skidded farther beneath the ladder. "Noah!" Eli shouted. "Take them!" June reached back through the grate. "Uncle Eli! Go!" Noah understood instantly. He shoved the children away from the opening, then dropped back down onto the ladder instead of retreating. Rainwater streamed off him. He descended 3 rungs, grabbed Eli by the front of the jacket, and hauled him upward hard enough to hurt. "What about Lydia?" Eli demanded. Noah's face changed. Not confusion. Recognition of a wound already forming. Before he could answer, the radio clip to Kessler's vest crackled to life through static. Then Lydia's voice came through. Weak. Breathing hard. But alive. "Don't stop for me." Everybody heard it. Kessler froze under Ranger. Noah went completely still on the ladder. The radio crackled again. Lydia coughed once, then forced the words out. "He planted the charge under the feed room, not the full barn. It's directional. Surface collapse only. Get the children clear of the west wall." Eli stared at the radio like it had become a miracle too dangerous to touch. Lydia kept speaking, every word rougher than the last. "Warren, if you can hear me." "You lose." Kessler's face twisted. Not into fear. Into something uglier. Something old enough to be personal. She was always sentimental, he said through clenched teeth. Noah came off the ladder. All the restraint left him at once. He crossed the chamber in 2 strides and drove his boot into Kessler's chest, pitting him flat in the water beneath Ranger's muzzle. You used my daughter as inventory. Kessler laughed blood into the runoff. And you used yours as camouflage. That landed hard because it was not fully false. June heard it from above. Eli knew she did because silence changed. Noah heard it too. The rage in him shook once, then settled into something colder. Maybe, Noah said, but she's still getting a life. He grabbed Kessler by the collar and hauled him to the ladder. Eli snatched the remote from under the rung and shoved it into his jacket. Then the brothers moved together without needing to think about it, Noah climbing first with Kessler half dragged, half thrown upward ahead of him, Eli behind with Ranger covering the shaft until the last possible second. The moment Ranger hit the surface, Noah shoved Kessler face first into the mud and kicked the grate back into place behind them. The west side of the barn was 30 yards away. June and the other children were already moving under Noah's shouted orders, stumbling through wet grass toward the tree line. Eli scooped Mason in one arm when the boy's legs nearly gave out. Ranger ran tight to the children, circling back every few seconds to keep the smallest ones moving. Then the feed room wall blew out. The blast hit as Lydia said it would, violent, directional, focused. One side of the barn erupted in timber, dirt, and a sheet of orange fire. The roof above the south corner folded inward with a scream of metal and old wood. The shockwaves slapped Rain sideways and knocked 2 of the children off their feet. Eli threw himself over Mason and felt splinters hammer across his back. When he looked up again, the barn was still standing. Not whole. Not safe. But not gone. Which meant Lydia had told the truth. The west wall groaned and began to sag. Noah turned toward it immediately. Eli caught his arm. No, she's in there. I know. Noah jerked free. Then let go. But June got there first. She ran through the rain and slammed into her father's chest with both arms around him so hard he staggered back a step. She was crying now. Not quiet tears. The kind that come when terror finally sees the edge of surviving it. You said you'd come back, she choked out. Noah froze. Everything in him, the soldier, the fugitive, the witness, the hunted thing, stopped inside that sentence. Then he dropped to his knees in the mud and held her. Really held her. Eli had never seen his brother break before. Not as a boy. Not after fights. Not after their mother died. Not after the army took him away and set pieces back in stories. But he broke then, in the rain, with his daughter in his arms and a burning barn behind him, and there was no dignity in it, and no point pretending there should be. The west wall collapsed. Fire blew outward. And from the black gap left behind, a figure stumbled into the rain. Lydia. She came out half bent, one arm tight against her ribs, face gray with smoke and pain, but alive. For a second, she simply stood there in the falling rain, as if she couldn't quite believe she had crossed that final threshold. Kessler saw her, and went still in the mud where Eli had pinned him with a knee between the shoulders. Mother, he said. Lydia looked at him for a long time. Then she walked past him. Not out of weakness. Not from mercy. From judgment. As if he had become too small to require the energy of hatred. She stopped in front of June and Noah, lifted one shaking hand, and touched June's hair back from her face. June leaned into it instinctively. Lydia looked at Noah next. You kept your promise. Noah's voice came out ruined. Barely. Barely counts. Sirens sounded in the distance then. Real ones. Local first responders. State units maybe. Too late for innocence, but not too late for daylight. Kessler heard them too and tried to rise. Ranger stopped him with a single savage bark. Eli drew the hard case, the notebook, and the drive from inside his jacket, then took the silvered remote from his pocket and set all of it in the mud where the morning could see it. Proof. Names. Routes. Children. Everything buried under years, and weather now dragged into rain and law. Mason stepped close to Eli at last, no longer holding the kitchen knife. He looked up with a child's raw seriousness and asked, "Are they still going to find us?" Eli looked at the road where the first flashing lights cut through the storm, then at Noah, June, Lydia, the other children, and Ranger leaning hard against his leg from exhaustion. "No," he said. It was a promise, and this time he meant to live inside it until it became true. By full dawn the property was full of uniforms, floodlights, medics, state investigators, and the kind of controlled chaos that only happens when a quiet piece of America suddenly learns what has been buried underneath it. Kessler was taken alive. The drive was logged. The children were wrapped in blankets and counted twice, then once more by Noah himself. Halpern was carried out of the barn alive, barely, with one hand still locked around the shotgun stock like even unconscious. He refused to surrender the night. And in the middle of all of it, while rain finally softened into mist, Eli stood beside Noah for the first time in 16 years, and did not know where to begin. Noah solved that too. He looked at Eli and gave the smallest broken smile. "You still move toward gunfire slower than you think." Eli laughed once, because somehow that was the safest possible place to let the grief out. "You still leave terrible instructions." June, wrapped in a medic's blanket, slipped one hand into Noah's and one into Eli's. Ranger pressed against all three of them at once, muddy, exhausted, and unshakably there. And Eli finally understood what the dog had done that night. Ranger had not led him to a half-buried safe. He had led him to the grave of one lie, the survival of one brother, the rescue of hidden children, and the family that had been waiting in the dark for someone brave enough to dig. This time, when the barking started, Eli listened. And because he did, nobody buried under that land stayed forgotten.